Welcome everyone again to the Learning to Birth webinar series, where we interview some of the world's most interesting and inspiring thought leaders on birth, pregnancy and the postpartum. And today we have with us Nanny Kimbo talking about the postpartum and the role of the postpartum doula. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey. So everybody, Kim has worked for 11 years as an independent nanny until 2018, when they moved to full-time postnatal doula work for the 4th trimester. And in June 19, this is so exciting, they were actually a finalist in the first ever Nanny of the Year UK Awards. That's incredible. That's an incredible achievement. Well done.
Thank you.
How was that? How has your life brought you to your role as first nanny and then moving from there to being a postpartum doula for the 4th trimester? How did that all happen?
So I come from a very large family. I have 8 siblings, and I have more cousins than I could shake a stick at. So I've always sort of been around children. And as my family have grown up, they've provided me with 18 nieces and nephews. So I have a very big family, lots of children, and I've always been really good with kids. I'm basically the goofy one. And that kind of, I moved to London about 15 years ago. I lived in the northwest of England, in a small city there, and then I moved to London, and I wanted to work in schools for a while, but then I sort of realised that I just wasn't on board with the whole national curriculum thing, and I wanted to work more one-to-one with children, and so I contacted an agency, and I wasn't really sure about nannies at the time because it wasn't really anything I'd been exposed to. And she asked me if I thought about nannying, and said that there was a family that was desperate for somebody, and would I give it a go? And I said, yeah, let's see how it goes. And they sort of, I guess they took a huge leap of faith with me. I'd never been a nanny before, and obviously I took a huge leap of faith with them as well. I gave up my job, gave up my flat. I was living in with the family. And unfortunately, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. It was so awful. I was miserable for 6 months, but I stuck it out because, you kind of have to give it a bit of a chance. And it just didn't work. So I moved on to another family, and just kind of found my flow, really. I tended to work with families for about a year and a half. And then in 2014, I worked with a family for 4 years. And then so now I'm just doing part-time nannying, sort of after school pickup thing. And then, so the doulaing, the postnatal doula, so I have 5 sisters, all of whom have sort of experienced some level of postnatal depression. And my youngest sister, she had it quite severely. And it was difficult for me not being able to sort of be there for her because I wasn't at home. And so I was on the other end of the phone. I was constantly talking to her, talking her through things. And she was really struggling because her partner was in the army at the time. So he was away, and she had a new baby, and she didn't know what she was doing, which, most people don't. And people kept saying to her, oh, you'll get used to it, it'll be fine. And I just, I said to her, well, actually, you might not get used to it. And so we were looking at options, to get help for her. And then when she had her second child, she struggled again, but this time it had a really big negative effect on her mental health. And she developed really severe health anxiety. And again, I was sort of on the other end of the phone night and day, just sort of talking her through things, and just sort of helping her to understand that actually, she's not crazy, there's a chemical imbalance, and helping her sort of find information because it's just not readily available. And I sort of, after that, I guess I started looking into postnatal mental health, And that's kind of how I found doulaing. And yeah, it just kind of went from there, I suppose.
That's beautiful. That's a really important role that you've taken up, because wow, when you've had a baby, there's so much going on physically, emotionally. You're kind of, you know, pushed offshore by yourself with this little baby, and you're alone at home. And often you know, your friends are off doing their thing, and you don't have any support. And what do? Suddenly you've got a 24-hour job and you can't even take care of your needs. It's a huge burden, mentally a huge, and emotionally a huge burden. Do you want to tell us about some of the things that a postpartum doula does and what needs families have who come to you?
So typically we sort of start working within the first few months after the birth. It varies from family to family how quickly they want you to start. And I mean, the role varies massively. Some families just want to sort of debrief their birth. You know, they want to tell you the birth story. And sometimes they'll realize that there's some sort of trauma there, and they'll need to work through that. So you can sort of help them find adequate support there. Some families, some parents just want to have a shower by themselves, you know, without having to feed the baby or check on the baby, that sort of thing. Some families just need somebody to cook some food, just so that there's always something available, so they don't have to think about it, so they can just, you know, stay in bed for that 4th trimester, and just bond with the baby, really.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I guess a good question is, what are maybe if there's a new family and, you know, they're preparing for birth, but they really haven't thought about the period after birth yet, and they maybe haven't heard of a postnatal doula before, and they don't know their value. Like, what would you say to a family like that about why they should maybe, you know, engage a postnatal doula ahead of time?
So when families welcome a new baby, everybody wants to visit, to see the baby, to cuddle the baby, to kiss the baby, to pick up the baby, to hold the baby, and nobody wants to do that with the parents. And so the role of the postnatal doula is to hold the parents, to pick up the parents, and to just cheer the parents on, you know, just actually let them know that they're doing a great job. Especially when they feel like they're not, because from experience, that's what a lot of people think. They don't know what they're doing, and they just feel like they're not doing things right. And so having been a nanny for such a long time, it kind of lends itself well to being a postnatal doula, because I've kind of been in that role anyway. You know, just making sure things run smoothly for the family.
Yeah, that experience, that past experience must really lend a very big, you know, depth and sensitivity to your role as postnatal doula, because you've had that past experience. The interesting thing is, I find that perhaps during the pregnancy, a mum might get used, or a birthing parent might get used to a lot of, you know, horror stories, kind of people foisting their horror stories on them, and you kind of like get a bubble on you. You're like, yeah, another one. Okay, thank you, move along. But then once you've had the baby, you might not realize that sometimes family members, maybe friends, or maybe just like nurses that you see, they're all well-meaning, but they maybe have seen a whole different way of parenting and nursing done when they, you know, from their generation or from their background, and they might not be prepared to welcome the way that you're going to do it. And so you might be facing a whole lot of criticism, not just for maybe how you were choosing to birth, but now for how you're choosing to nurse and parent, and how you sleep, and all sorts of things. What sort of suggestions do you provide to parents who are maybe feeling like really isolated and alone because of that negativity that's around them, when they're just trying to do a good job and love their baby and build their new family?
Yeah. So I actually have a pretty huge client library, all sorts of parenting books from basically every angle. I've got some classics from the sort of 60s, 70s, you know, really old school parenting, and right up to current stuff. And the reason that I do have some pretty controversial books as well, but the reason I have all of these books is to just show the parents that actually there's more than one way of doing the same thing. And just because your mum did it this way and your mum's mum did it this way, and for generations you've done it that way, doesn't mean it's the only way that something can be done. And you know, things change, time changes, and you know, our environment changes, and I think parenting styles have to evolve as well. And I think, you know, each family needs their own parenting style.
Yes. Oh, I love the idea of that library to provide perspective on where these opinions that other people are going to give you actually come from. Because going back, and I haven't read old parenting books, but I have read old birthing books and some of them and the advice they give are really very interesting. So that would be a fantastic resource to give parents. That's great. That's great. You know, is there any specific kind of like beyond you, you know, what do you see other postnatal doulas doing? Like, what sort of roles do they do in terms of the practical services they provide, the emotional services they provide? How do you help connect the parents who come to you with like the greater fabric and network of the resources that they need?
Generally, the best way to go about it is just to take the parents' lead. Sort of in the first couple of days, it's just about listening. It's about being there and just listening without judgment, because friends and family, though they're well-meaning, sometimes they make judgments, and that can make a new parent feel bad. And so just listen and sort of, you know, wait to see if there are any issues. And then rather than telling the parents how to deal with it, ask them how they think we should deal with it, and then sort of help them explore it. So rather than just saying, okay, so this is the problem and here's how we fix it, it's like, okay, let's have a look at this. This has come up quite a lot, and here are a few ways that I've read about, or, you know, there's a few books that say this. And then just sort of make sure the parents take the lead more than anything, I think, is really important.
That's fantastic. No, I really love that approach. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's get into some interesting conversation here, because you actually brand yourself as the queer doula in UK. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came up with that branding and what that means for you?
So I'm a queer person. I identify as trans non-binary, and it's a very recent thing for me. I just celebrated my 1-year rebirthday very recently, which is, you know, very exciting and scary. And when I did my first course with Doula UK in June last year, I noticed that there was a distinct sort of lack of material about LGBT parents. I mean, they exist, we know they exist, but there was nothing specific. There wasn't even a section in the course for LGBT parents. And so when I raised the question, the course facilitator sort of said, you know, do you have anything to add as a queer person? And I thought, okay, I can do this, but, you know, it needs to be more. And I've had a look around to see if there are any queer specific courses, and at the moment there just aren't. And I think, so the reason I want to specialise with queer parents and queer families is because there's just sort of an extra layer of barriers that queer people face, especially trans men who want to have babies. There's a lot of stigma, especially for trans men who carry their own babies. And I want to be able to not just say, you know, queer people are welcome, but I want to have a service that's created by queer people for queer people. Because, you know, I have a unique understanding of what it's like to be a queer person. And I think, you know, that all the training and stuff, it's great, but if you haven't really been there, you don't really understand what it's like, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. What sort of needs do, you know, LGBT families have who come to you that are very specific, that then you're able to help them because of your background and your perspective that maybe someone else couldn't in that same compassionate way?
So I think postnatally, there's things like mother and baby groups, that sort of thing. For example, if two men have a baby together, they want to go to support groups, but a lot of support groups are mother and baby. And that's not to say that they wouldn't welcome dads, but you know, it's just having that sign there, mother and baby, sort of automatically excludes them. Excuse me. And I just think also helping them find other material. So I have quite a lot of books for queer parenting, or just parenting that doesn't specifically say mother, and maybe not specifically gendered things as well. And it's, I think, you know, there's so few targeted resources specifically for queer parents. And I think, you know, there's definitely a growing need for it, especially for trans parents.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us maybe some of the resources that exist, that like the books that do exist that you recommend? Are there, what should we go and look for?
So the best book that I've read so far is a book called Where's the Mother, I believe it's called. It's by a gentleman called Trevor McDonald, and he is a Canadian trans man who he birthed two of his own children, and he talks about sort of his journey being pregnant and then chest feeding, and basically running all over Canada to get milk for his baby, donor milk, because he wanted his baby to have breast milk for the first year. And he found that after having chest surgery, it was actually quite difficult for him to produce milk. I think that's probably the best one I've read so far. Unfortunately, there's still precious little available for trans folk. There are a couple of websites that I've used, and there's a couple of documentaries that have recently come out. There was a brilliant one called A Deal with the Universe, and that was a couple, a trans man and a cisgender woman, who they wanted to have a baby, and basically the man carried the baby, and it was a very personal, very intimate look at their sort of journey. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's definitely worth a watch. And then there was another movie that came out earlier.
What was the name of that? Sorry, I just missed that. Can you just tell us the name of the movie again?
Yeah, it was called A Deal with the Universe.
Right. Perfect name. Beautiful. Amazing. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And then a more recent documentary film came out called Seahorse, the Father Who Gave Birth. And that's about a gentleman called Freddie McConnell. And he, again, similar sort of thing. He wanted to have a baby. And yeah, it's because there's not very much available for, especially for trans men. So it's all still very new. But I know that Leeds University are doing a lot of work on trans pregnancy at the moment. So there's a lot of stuff sort of in the works. But yeah, it's still sort of, it's not necessarily rare, but it's not sort of talked about very much that trans men have babies. Sorry.
Yeah, it's something that it's beautiful though that it's coming up now on social media. Like there have been quite a few posts recently on Instagram on the, you know, different pregnancy feeds of trans parents, you know, carrying their babies, which is beautiful for them that they can have that experience and do that. And it's beautiful that it's being shared. Is there any wisdom that if there's parents out there who are on this journey who, you know, are coming from this background and they're watching this, is there any, you know, wisdom that you'd want to share with them to help, you know, guide them on their way if they're watching this with you?
I would probably say don't be afraid. Don't listen to people's comments, because it doesn't matter what kind of parent you are. You could be the best parent in the world and you're still doing it wrong. And I think, you know, just have that faith in yourself. You know, there are awful parents out there and there are amazing parents out there, but there will always be somebody who will criticize the way you're doing things no matter what. And so I think, you know, just have that faith in yourself and just take that leap if that's something that you really want.
That's so true. And that really is wisdom for everyone, because no matter how well you parent, like we were talking about before and the different models and the different books, there's always going to be someone out there who's going to pick on you for it. So that was actually a really beautiful journey into adulthood for me and maturity. Once I had my baby, I was like, wow, I finally realized that you cannot make everyone happy. You know, you're doing your best. You cannot make everyone happy. And it was suddenly this huge release, this opportunity, this door that opened in my life, this question. Yeah. What if I just make myself happy rather than trying to please the hordes, you know, whoever they are? Yeah. What if I just start with the question, what makes me happy? And of course, my baby, and go from there. And that's a journey every parent has to go on. Yeah. Well, you know, what's going to be interesting is that, you know, in Australia, and it's a shame it's taken so long. It's hundreds of years overdue, really. But in Australia, finally, it doesn't have to be a man and a woman who get married. It can be anybody, however they identify, whatever, you know, letter they have next to their name on their certificates. And that's really beautiful. I really see new opportunities opening up. Well, how do you see the world? You know, there are many countries around the world now that are allowing marriage beyond just man and woman. How do you see that as changing the world? What does the future of the world mean in terms of gender and how people identify? What's it going to look like 10, 20 years from now, do you think?
I hope, I'm going to say I hope, because, you know, we just don't know how it's going to go. But I hope we're just going to see such a diverse range of people, genders and sexualities. I think that there's always, it's such a contentious issue at the moment, I think, just politically speaking, to identify as anything outside of the binary, as it were. But I think, you know, if people were to just shake off the shackles of binary, they would realize that actually the world is so much more exciting. And, you know, a man can wear a dress and he doesn't have to be homosexual. He could just be a man in a dress. And, you know, men having babies, it's a beautiful thing and it's an incredible thing. And why can't they experience it? And I do hope that sort of in 10, 15 years time that, you know, a trans man gives birth and it's just normal. That's what I hope for.
That is beautiful. And there's the possibilities as well opening up for this new generation now being born, like just now that these things are here. It's like, you know, when in the past it's all about, you know, the gender reveal, but it's really just the genital reveal, isn't it? And these whole ideas that we press on our poor little babies that, you know, because they have this shape of genital, they're going to wear that color and have their hair that way. And, you know, and it's beautiful because now our children can grow up and, you know, we can talk about, they can wear anything. They can be any color. They can, you know, have their hair any length and you know, they can talk about, you know, just marrying someone for love rather than marrying, you know, for some other reason. I think that's really the focus here. It's just going to bring the focus, hopefully, for the world back onto love, you know, and what is love and sharing that love.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, I hope that we're going to reach a point where a child doesn't have to declare sort of their sexuality or anything like that. You know, I remember myself, sort of my own journey through queerhood, I suppose. You know, it's been quite difficult. And because things have changed, because when I was younger, I didn't have the understanding that I have now. And so it sort of appears as though I've changed and I've changed my mind, but that's not really how it's happened. It's just that I've evolved because now I have, you know, I have more resources available. And sort of, you know, I've now found something that actually fits and fits properly.
Beautiful. Yes. And we can wear that as long as we like. And then if we change, we change. And it's no one else's expectations or boxes that we have to fulfill.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
it would just be wonderful.
a lot more freedom in the world, hopefully. Just freedom up here and freedom in here. And hopefully a lot more mental health then because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, we could move back to talking a little bit about the postpartum period. There's a lot of things that a parent goes through in those first few weeks that they might not be expecting, because that was my experience. I was like, oh my gosh, no one told me any of this. I just thought I had to get through the birth, and now there's all these other things happening.
Yeah.
What sort of things does a parent have to prepare for that fourth trimester that they might not know about?
I think a lot of changes within their body as their hormones start to change. If they are breast or chest feeding, they're going to experience a lot of fluctuations in hormones, and it will probably have an impact on their mood. And I think it's something that affects the whole family as well, not just the birthing parent. There have been recent studies that say that grandparents experience an increase in serotonin when there's a new grandbaby around, which is just incredible. And non-gestational fathers also have a similar experience. And I think, just as long as parents just know that, no two journeys are the same. And if you've got somebody there for you, you don't have to go through it by yourself. And you don't have to burden your partner necessarily either, because there's somebody else that you can both share with.
When would a new parent contact you? Would it be during their pregnancy or post-birth that they reach out to you for help?
It would probably ideally be during their pregnancy, sort of towards the end of the pregnancy. Mostly to make sure that there's availability. But I mean, certainly within the early weeks, if there are doulas that are available, I imagine that there are some doulas who could take on last minute work, because it's kind of, it's not really a job that you don't spend like the whole day with the family. So it's not like you're working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday with a family. So it's quite flexible like that.
Would a family normally ask you to help, with things like just the normal basic housework during those first few weeks, or is that something that they ask someone else help with?
It's something that varies greatly. For me, as a nanny, I have experience with cooking, with cleaning, keeping the nursery tidy. I've put furniture together. I've painted decking. I've painted fences. I've done all sorts of things that you wouldn't believe were in the scope of a nanny, but I did them anyway. And I think it's something between sort of the family and the doula. And it's completely different for every family. Somebody might just want somebody else to listen, whereas another family might need somebody to do plenty of cooking, and another family might just need somebody to keep the in-laws at bay for a little while. So it's no two families are the same, really.
No, how beautiful. Yes. I guess I was very lucky and I had a beautiful doula for my first birth that initiated me into the, wise ways of the doulas and the beautiful gifts that you can give. And is there any benefit, I wondered, over like some doulas, that you get them during your birth, your pregnancy, they do offer to come a couple times, post-birth.
Yeah.
Is there any benefit to having them as separate two people, or would you recommend, if your doula does postpartum doula work as well, to just continue with the same person? What would you recommend?
I think if your doula is sort of trained in birth and postnatal work, then having the same person would probably be easier, because if your doula has been at your birth and then they are with you postnatally, you don't necessarily have to go through everything you've already experienced. And if you've had a difficult time, you don't have to explain it all and sort of relive that. But then, there are some doulas that have specialties. So I do some alternative therapies, hypnotherapy and tapping therapy, which some families might find useful. Whereas other families, you know, they work with essential oils and that sort of thing, and other doulas sort of fit in with that. So I think, you know, that there isn't really a one size fits all kind of thing. It's so varied. It's quite incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us? You got to tell us how to follow you and how families who are listening, if they want to reach out for support with you, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so my website, www.thequeerdoula.co.uk. All of my social media is linked on there. But if you want to just find me on Facebook or Instagram, I am at Nanny Kimbo. And all of my sort of nanny and doula stuff all goes on there. Both my Instagram and my Facebook are completely public. So even if you just want to sort of come and have a peek, just see what's going on, it's all public.
Can families like you just, maybe there's a family who's not local to you, but who want to reach out to you as your role as the queer doula, maybe for some mentoring, can they do that? Connect with you that way from wherever they are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they come via Facebook, either they can message me at Nanny Kimbo, or they can find the Queer Doula. I have a Facebook page as well, which is the Queer Doula. They could just message me there as well.
Yeah. Now, everyone's probably watching this and wondering where you are, and that looks pretty exciting, and I know where you are. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you are?
Yeah, so I live on a boat. It's very small. It's very crowded. This is my wardrobe right behind me. This is my oven right here, right next to my wardrobe. This is my artwork. Yeah, it's a cruiser. Wow. It is. It's kind of sideways. I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of sideways. And there's a whole. But yeah, I'm an artist. I'm a painter and a writer as well.
That's fantastic. Something very relaxing about living on a boat, because you've got the little movement of the waves rocking you at night and the slush of the water. It's a very beautiful place to be. Yeah,
it's lots of people romanticize boat living. I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. It's
everything gets a bit moist.
Well,
everything gets a bit moldy.
Yeah,
having
moist and moldy, everything smells. Yeah, there are challenges, let's just say.
Yeah, well, you're a very brave woman, regardless, and you're doing amazing work in this world. So thank you for being strong and brave and trusting in your sense of self and your sense of identity and your sense of, you know, who you are and what your gift is to the world, because we all really need to hear, you know, what your message is and incorporate it. And I think it's very, very important for you to be able to provide this support out there to the people who specifically need it and who need to know that there's people out there who understand that the journey that they've gone through isn't just their journey. And because that's the biggest thing, knowing that you're not alone, I think, to really being able to cope. It's like, it's not just me. I haven't just done this. Other people have done this too. And, you know, I can find them and reach out to them and find that support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, before we head off, I do tend to ask you a bit of a general question at the end. Mm-hmm. And you can answer it any way you like, I guess. And I guess my question for you is, how will the world be different, I guess, when, you know, what's your vision for the world? But, you know, when just love is love and, you know, trans dads have their babies and, you know, women and women couples, you know, have their babies, and babies are just babies growing up in this world, you know, for who they are. Like, how will the world be different? What's your vision?
I feel like everybody would be freer, because I feel like as a child, for myself personally, I was always curious. You know, I was dressed as a girl and I had to do all girl things, and I didn't want to, and I was miserable as a child. because I did that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I knew that I wasn't a girl. Lots of people say that children don't know, but believe me, we do. Like 3 years old, I knew that I wasn't a girl. But you know, I was told all of my life, of course you're a girl, of course you're a girl. And then sort of as I got older and, you know, moved into sort of more open circles, I realized that actually there is something else out there. And I think, you know, people would just be so much more liberated if they weren't constrained by the binary, and be that with gender, sexuality, whatever. If they just let go a little bit, they just realize that there's so much more out there, and people would be so much happier.
Yes, what you've spoken is so true. And it's such a gift when our children tell us who they are, for us just to listen.
Yeah.
And not say, no, you're this, or no, you're that, or like, because our kids understand a lot more about the world sometimes than we do, I have to say, about the real essence of what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kim. Everyone, please follow her at Nanny Kimbo, Instagram, Facebook. Reach out to her if you'd like mentoring or support, or just to have a chat about where you are in your life, if you want to have some help and direction. And thank you for listening again to Learning to Birth. And you can follow Learning to Birth at Learn to Birth, Instagram and Facebook. And we'll see you later in our Facebook group. Thank you. See you, Nanny Kimbo.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.